Welcome back. Episode 11, Wing It Podcast, goosedigital.com. Who do we have?
Robin Kroll.
Kevin Butler.
Emily Crawford.
Emily, welcome.
Thank you.
Another first timer.
Another first timer. Bringing on the newbies.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's always nervous when they come on the podcast. They got little butterflies in the tummy. How are you doing?
Well, so far, so good.
I think it's because we make a big deal about it. We're just like, the first
I know.
time.
I mean, it's on video. I know.
Maybe we should play a cool, welcome back to your 100th episode.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Veteran.
You're a veteran.
Yeah.
Well, what are we talking about today? Personalization in B2B marketing.
Yeah.
So we're going to go down that hole because Emily
We
has a
are,
lot of
Michael.
experience. What's that?
Yes, we are.
Kevin,
Michael J.
Kevin, we are. Yeah.
Of Goose Digital Inc.
Actually, your name is K. Okay, because I got that wrong on the invite. But we're talking about this because, we focus on marketing automation, and with marketing automation, if you do it right, you can get a large amount of personalization into your programs, which, as we know, the research suggests that the more relevant you are to your audience, the better response rate you're going to have.
And you can also say, in order to get it right, you need to use personalization.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
at what point, when you think of sort of baseline personalization, it's like name, company, things like that. And at what point do we say that's not even personalization anymore? That's
just like being
the bare standard of what a half decent email looks like.
Thanks for being considerate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, Emily and I were talking about that a little bit earlier about, is having, your name or business name, does it even consider to be personalization anymore?
Yeah,
or is
exactly.
it table stakes?
Yeah, honestly, we talking about that this morning, it almost isn't anymore. It just, people just expect to automatically see. You should know where I'm from, what I do I have kids? Those are just the bare minimums,
Yeah.
maybe not the what you do, but your basics.
Yeah, and I think especially when more and more we're asking or we're discovering this information, but I think particularly when you're asking for this information, so you filled out a form potentially, and you know that the company has that information, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then just not really able to use it, or they're not using it. So we thought this would be a good topic because for B2B, it's probably an untapped area for a lot of businesses. So why don't we just go down that road of how would we sort of define personalization by maybe our standards, or just kind of what we would think in that B2B lens? I mean, Em, what would you say from a B2B perspective would be your kind of table stakes?
So automatically right off the top, everything we send out, first name, last name, obviously we know their email. And most things that we send out also would include at least the company that they work for in the industries that I've worked in primarily.
Right.
And so you're saying that's sort of table stakes at this point to be able to have that information.
I would say.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if in some of the things that we've done for customers, if we've been able to see what that impact is. So understanding when you have personalization versus you don't have that basic personalization, have we seen any differences in engagement based on having that?
Definitely. Actually, one of the clients that we've been working with, over the last 24 months, we went from having no personalization to starting to include even as little things as first name in the subject line. And right away, we saw a big increase in open rates.
Sure. Yeah.
And as we started to pull some of that stuff and more detailed information into the emails, we saw higher engagement, higher click-through rates, higher conversions. So definitely... we've seen, like I said, over 24 months, we've seen a big progression in engagement.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I mean, I bet you a lot of brands wouldn't realize that. They wouldn't realize what a small change or would have that kind of the impact on their engagement.
Well, I think if you had, I know that even for some of the marketing automation companies, I'm not going to name the ones that I've subscribed to information, and I'll get an email that's literally, I wasn't joking, it was like, "Hi, M." But yet, the next week I'll get a, "Hi, Michael." So to me, there's something that's happened there where maybe over time I've opted into two things, or I don't get two emails. Like, it's not like I'm getting duplicate emails. So sometimes I'm on one list, sometimes on another list. Do you think that just being consistent with that personalization can be a challenge for companies, so that
Certainly
they know
ones at scale, right? So if
Yeah.
you think of any of those organizations, they're probably generating thousands of leads a week.
Right.
And so who's watching and sort of maintaining like a centralized
Yeah.
database? Like, I think when we talk about personalization, it really comes down to how clean is the database and what's like the method you're capturing names, and are you cleaning that lead once it's come in? Like, it's even something like, for example, you fill out a form, Michael Turk saying to you, what if you did them all capitals?
Right.
Because your caps lock was on.
Who's cleaning that up?
Right. You don't want to get an email saying like, hi, Michael.
Yeah.
Just stuff like that, right? A level of cleanliness.
So, I know, Em, you've worked on some pretty big campaigns and lots of data behind them. There is a world where you would chunk down the campaign and say, well, we know we're pretty confident in 30% of our data. Like, we want to go out with a campaign that has this personalization and delivers a different type based on that person and what their role is, let's say, but we don't have 100% of our contacts have that information. So instead of going out with a less than stellar campaign, let's narrow that audience, try out what would happen if we went to 30% that had that information, and then take that back to the business. Maybe you can explore a little bit about, in situations where you just don't have complete data.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about that a lot, especially lately. Actually, in the last 6 months, we've really been focusing on the CRM database and data cleanliness and data quality. Very much, garbage in, garbage out is really what we're talking
Yeah.
about a lot. So actually, we've been focusing a lot with the client that I've been working with on getting the data cleaned. So those are the things where we're going through and we're only using exactly what you said. Instead of saying we know what product they purchased last, we're going, okay, we know your name and we know what company you work for, so we're going to lead with that, and we're going to ask you some specific questions around some of the data that we would like to start piloting.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really great point. Well, two really great points. One is about the data cleanliness and being responsible about that, because there's, the same way there's an expectation that if I'm going to, submit a form or a subscription, I expect that to be used when it's brought back out to me. But there's also this expectation that, I can subscribe in multiple different channels, and it's up to the company to figure out how to cleanse and merge that data so they know that I'm actually just, one Michael Turksani and not two. That's a scary thought, isn't
What
it?
about this idea for this client? Because I know they do some pretty heavy email marketing. Is this idea of a campaign around like data gen or like data generation, where it's like, it's not about uncovering new leads or anything like that. It may not even directly be about engaging that audience so much as it is about learning more about them, to be able to be more confident in the database, to know that everything that these individuals are filling out now is stuff you could use later, like next quarter. Or,
No, and I think you've done that, right?
That's exactly what we've been doing a lot of, because like I said, our focus lately has been very much on data cleanliness, especially like you mentioned, companies that scale quickly earlier. I think that's the case for a lot of people as they start out and there's no real procedures, nobody's policing anything, there's no policies in place, and then we end up with all this data that is great, but it may not be assigned to the right people. Maybe it's not accurate. Those are the things that we've been really focusing on now that we've kind of gotten a handle on personalization. Now the focus is, okay, let's really get in there and make sure we have exactly what we need so we can really start to impact these people.
So you've got a strategy around the data, right?
Very
So
much.
that's another.
That to me, that's a level of sophistication
Yeah.
for organizations
Yeah.
that sometimes you don't have the bandwidth or I don't know, like the ability to get to, because there's so many other bigger fires to put out. But once you're at a level where you're starting to think about that and you have a know-how of how to execute with certain data, I think that puts you in a different stratosphere as far as like sort of being new to this stuff versus now you know what to do with it, and it's just a matter of you just don't have it to do it with.
Yeah, and one of the things about taking the strategic approach with the data generation is that if you're asking for a particular piece of data, you know why, and part of that strategy should be what is the benefit for the end customer?
Right.
How isn't that going to make them easier to to engage with us, to learn whatever it is that you're trying to help them do. So when you have that as a strategy, and then it's easier to ask someone to say, can you provide this data so that we can make sure that we're communicating out with you? We're only sending what you're actually interested in.
Yeah, and so like it's interesting because I think like the marriage between segmentation and personalization is really understated, but it's kind of they go hand in hand, I think. So as an example, like at a previous org that I worked at before, it was sort of a tool you could swap in and out. And so it was very regular. You could use vendor A one year and then vendor B the following year. And so one of the questions we'd ask in the form, it's your standard first name, last name, job title, company. But then we'd also ask, when are you looking at replacing this product or this platform? And we had options in the drop down. I think it was within 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, or I don't know. And that would more or less throw you into a bucket of, okay, now we know how serious they may be and how sudden or not so sudden or urgent their buying cycle may be. And then we can personalize, not just on name and company and, hi, Emily Crawford, are you interested in blah, blah, blah? But it's more about the relevant message, and the whole message is personalized based on a perceived need.
Yeah, I think, we talked about, we've got this B2B versus B2C, and B2B is what we're focusing on today, and this just because we think it's kind of underserved. But just looking at some stats here from eConsultancy, in their 2017 State of Personalization report, it actually says that, in their, I don't know how big this audience was, but only 22% of shoppers were actually satisfied with the level of personalization. Em, in your experience in sort of soliciting end contacts for some additional data points to support what, to your point, Robin, what eventually will be more value to them because they will receive that better, more relevant information for them. And that is personalization in addition to more relevant marketing to them. What's the feedback been? I mean, if you found that those people, when asked those types of profiling questions, are open to providing responses back?
So we, last year, we did a campaign that was part get some information and part we want answers to these questions so we can help you better. And we actually had really good results. People gave like well thought out answers even when there was an option to just like hand key their own information. So I believe our submission rate on that was 40%, which was awesome.
That's amazing.
We got a lot of really good feedback from that. This year, we're actually, as we've talked about, we're planning on doing a data only survey. So more information just about them. So I will get back to you.
Now, is that totally new information for anyone in the database, or is it just sort of backfilling info that you want to sort of other contacts in the database already have?
Both.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, when you go through these stats, I think and Robin, you touched on it briefly, I think when we're saying people are open to doing this, stats certainly support providing that information. And I think we're talking about some of these consumer stats, but ultimately we're all consumers. So I think what we're all in our, outside of our day jobs, being bombarded by these retailers and brands that aren't maybe personalization, they're on that path to sort of really utilizing their data better. But equally, like in our job worlds, we're probably just as equally likely to provide that data if it's going to be used correctly. So if you just profiled me and said, what would you rather, hear from us about this topic or that topic, and then you just keep sending me things about the other topic, I think that's not not a good practice, right?
I like where you're going with that too, because I think part of it's what are you asking of your audience in terms of how are you trying to define the things that are important to them? Because maybe it's less about the topics per se, and maybe it's more like, well, when would you like to be communicated? Every Tuesday? Got it. Or, just something like that. Because personalization doesn't just have to be names and job titles.
No, you're right. It can be something about the cadence as well. So, when do you want to hear back?
Right.
How frequently?
Is it a monthly
All of
roll
those
up?
things,
Is it
yeah.
yeah.
So many of these things really contribute to the fact that regardless if it's your personal or your work inbox, there is all this clutter,
There will
and
always be.
there will always be. But when if a company or a brand can put something in front of you that you say, oh, I didn't, this is not just a message that could randomly be sent to anybody. This is something specifically for me. I'm interested in it, and I've got 10 that I'm not interested in. Well, there's no question what I'm going to go ahead and engage with, and that's a brand that's going to, I'm going to continue to follow, because I feel that I've given them some information. In return, they've been able to give me some value.
Yeah. So maybe we'll pivot this. So I think we all agree that, personalization in B2B is probably, steps behind B2C. That a good opportunity for B2B businesses could be to go through some profiling, come up with a strategy. To your point, Kevin, how are we trying to engage this audience? What dialogue do we want to have? So certainly defining that makes your first priority makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then going through a process to pull that group, and slowly over time, develop those data points to be used for personalization. Where do we think things are going in 2019? If you said, I'm a business, I've got 50,000 names, or maybe even 10,000 names, and maybe even less. Maybe if you've only got 3,500 names because you're very high value accounts, and what would we recommend to a business like that that's launching out into marketing automation for the first time to get to a place where they're using personalization effectively? Turn that to anybody that wants to jump in.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll start. I guess there's two ways of looking at that. The more you understand about, so you've got a small database, about 3,500 people, the more you can understand about who that audience is, and understanding the value that you can bring to them. Not only does that allow you to, to be very personalized and therefore more successful in how you communicate with them, but there's the additional value saying, well, once I understand the value to a group of 3,500, I'm going to be able to go out and find more people who have those same interests.
Right.
And it allows you to, to embark on a lead gen strategy as well. So I think I think you can double down on that.
Okay. Pam?
I think whether it's 3,500 or 35,000, I think that for 2019, I think the fact of the matter is that people do expect that really personalized experience. And so to me, gone are the days where we can just get by with like, hi, M on an email. I think that really the focus for 2019, and this may be shaded a bit by what we're doing with my client, but it should be data cleanliness and making sure whether it's 3,500 or 35,000 that you know those people and you're sending them the right message at the right time, because they're just not opening it.
I think of a if a portion of that audience is not, say, your prospects. Certainly, if what we're talking about is your customer marketing and your communications, which we talk a lot about, you figure, well, you would know a fair bit about these clients. Like even for us, I mean, our clients tend to use one of 4 or 5 pieces of core technology that we support. Well, we're probably not going to send you, information about the other technology that you're not
Hopefully
using,
not.
right? Like hopefully not, right? Like, and we know that because you're our customer, and we're, so just taking those extra steps to your point, make sure the list is accurate, but then actually doing something with it.
Well, the reason I was kind of like, is because you sort of stole it from my mouth, but I was going to go in a slightly different direction, which is start to prioritize regular data cleanliness and sort of database health. So not just every 2 years, maybe it's something you revisit every, I don't know, maybe 2 quarters or something. 6 months. Yeah. But this idea anyways that things change enough and we need to spend time in it. And if, to your point, data in, data out, if your database if you can't really stand behind it and say, yeah, I actually really believe in this, the people on it, and all the data we have on them, then what good are your programs really going to be? I think so is that really a trend? Is that cutting edge thought leadership?
Yeah. And
no,
I think there's a batch of users out there that would say, well, we actually have, businesses out there. I was going to say, maybe CRM users that say, well, we have great data. We have actually a good handle on a level of that data, but is marketing how progressive is our marketing function? Are they
Right.
are they really grabbing that, or are they saying, well, no, we're running 5 or 10 events a year, plus we've got branding exercises, we're participating in social media, and what do you mean? Like, how am I supposed to now adjust my a certain type of email campaign, or maybe even it means introducing or forking one of those campaigns into two streams now that you have this data? Is the marketing side of the house really going after that?
Yeah.
I think that the client that you're on, Em, is they're really pushing an envelope. But I would say, wouldn't you say, Kev, like the average person that we're talking to, like they're trying to keep their head above water, let alone leveraging the data,
I think,
even if they had it.
I would totally agree. Like if we talked about like a sophisticated marketing department, and we've had podcasts about sort of those key roles and everything, but a really sophisticated marketing department to me has some sort of data analyst or someone who is in charge of deciding what and how the data comes in and how it's formatted, maybe a little bit influencing on how it's used, but also has some sort of process, whether it's he or she doing it themselves or someone else, and they're governing it. How is it being cleaned? To what level of cadence is that happening? And again, going back to that idea of your database is pretty solid, in good shape, and the recency level is very, very recent.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we can probably park that one at this stage. Maybe we circle back and leverage some of your insights, Em, on how you can bake that into ongoing reporting and marketing attribution once you have these pieces. And we touched on that at the beginning, but I think could be a good follow up on having this data in action, and then what that means for your ongoing reporting.
Cool.
So great, another good one. Thanks, Em.
Awesome. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Thanks for joining
Emily.
us.
Good job.
We can't wait to have you back.
Peace.